Okay, I think we are live on YouTube. So welcome everybody. This is going to be the first meeting of the Node.js Build team for June 2025. So yeah, let me share on the chat the link to the notes. So I ask you if you can to just add yourself as attendees and include your GitHub handle as well. And then we can start officially with the agenda. So first of all, there is anyone that want to do any announcement? Okay, seems like no announcements for now. So let's jump to the first official topic in the agenda, which is the issue 3686, which is related to the infrastructure for Orca and macOS platform, basically. Not very sure if we have big news. Let me see, it's loading here. Yeah, I think I have a slow connection today. So, or maybe it's GitHub. I think it's a slow connection.
While you're loading, I think I saw a few emails from Mac Stadium asking about upgrading to Orca 3. Is that something that people are aware of or even looking at?
I was not looking at it. I saw some tickets about it, and I wanted to discuss. I think it's a good option if we can push to version 3 because there are some nice stuff there regarding especially to how we save the state of the machines. So when we reboot them and these kind of things, it's much better and much safe. It will require something tricky, if I remember well, because last time we did some update also, it was a little bit tricky, because I think when we do the update, and Ryan correct me if I'm wrong, I think what's going to happen is they are going to remote the VMs, update the cluster itself, and then basically we need to re-add the VMs. So it's going to be potentially a period where the machines won't be available for the collaborators.
That was something that I wanted to reach out to Mac Stadium about and find out whether or not, because it seems like we're in a state where they're not really sure who set up the original support for us. And we've got our ARM VMs, and then we've got the rest of the Orca 2 cluster. And what I wanted to do was approach them and say, hey, here's an idea. We want to set up a new Orca 3 cluster and then move everything and get it all up and running and then shut the old one down. And that way we avoid the whole upgrade process and just do it that way. And I think they'll be amenable to that. But I got authorization from Ben to go ahead and pursue that. But I wanted to talk to you guys first before making any asks and stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're comfortable leading that, I'm happy for that. That sounds like a reasonable plan. My only concern with the emails was I haven't paid much attention. I was just worried that if we don't upgrade, something would grind to a halt, or would suddenly be locked out of VMs, because I think that has happened in the past where we've not been able to log into them, and then for whatever reason we've not been able to get in, and eventually had to rebuild the whole things anyway. So
right, where do those emails go?
I think it's anyone linked to the Mac Stadium account. I don't know, actually. They're coming through from Mac Stadium, so somehow they must be coming through to that to the sort of organization or whatever it is in Mac Stadium that we're all under, that I had to add you and Ulysses to. I don't know if there are maybe notification settings that are affected on that, but I don't remember specifically opting into things. But I am seeing emails.
Yeah, I see. Actually, got access to the email. Seems like it was sent from support and arrived to not everybody on the build team, by the way. That's just some people.
Right, but I'm wondering if those are the people that were added to the Mac Stadium account. So you remember you got me to add you, and then you added Ryan to something in Mac Stadium. I wonder if it's related to that account.
But it's tricky because, for example, I don't see the email from Michael here. I think it's maybe you get this email only if you created tickets in the past. So
I'm there,
or something like that. You're there?
Well, I've definitely never created a ticket on Mac Stadium. So,
okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
It does seem like there's some old people like Ash and Rod are still there.
Right. I think they were still in the Mac Stadium account when I added Ulysses. I think I'd still there. So
I
That
think,
makes sense.
That's why I'm assuming it's something configured on the Mac Stadium side rather than any particular thing we've done or not. Yeah, I don't think we subscribe the build alias, for example, to it because I don't know if you can create a Mac Stadium account with that alias. Possibly, I don't know.
yeah.
The other thing I will share Richard's concern, because I think one of the emails said something about your certificates are expiring. Oh, by the way, if you upgrade to 3, that'll fix it, right? But it sounded to me like there was an end date to those certificates.
Yeah, SSL certificate. Yeah, seems like that can be a challenge. Yeah, so definitely we need to migrate. Seems like, yeah, we don't have any options there. So yeah, talking about the original plan from Brian, I think it's a good idea if we can just have a different cluster and we can just move stuff to the new cluster. Sounds super good. And even if we can get the new ARM machines, that will be a good option as well.
Okay.
Sorry, I was gonna just want to clarify. I think you'd like this moving to 3 let us have both ARM and x86 in that cluster too, or is there?
I think it depends on what Mac Stadium give us. So I don't think you automatically get the resources for an
Right.
upgrade.
Yep.
So
that was Ryan's proposal, I think, right?
Was to go to a new account, a new Walker 3 account that would have resources for both.
Yeah.
So instead of
Right.
upgrading our existing one, would be to create a brand new one with the things we ask for, rather than trying to add things to the existing and then do an upgrade, as I understand. I know it's
And I did have some questions on which versions of Mac OS we do need to support, because it seemed like I found other artifacts in the Node.js repo that was like, we don't support old versions at all. And so some, like the 10.15 stuff, I think is, I don't know where the boundaries are between what we're supposed to be testing and what,
it's
we're.
kind of fuzzy on Mac OS because Apple never actually formally stick a flag in the sand and say this version is now not supported. They just stop releasing updates without actually announcing that they've stopped doing updates. So it's kind of a little bit of guesswork as to if they're still patching versions of Mac OS, you kind of assume they're in support. But if they've stopped, then you sort of draw a line, a conclusion that we tend to move very conservatively in Node, and like we do try and bump often, but yeah, not to the very latest because we know that people don't always update immediately. And it's a little bit of a judgment call. We have had to move to, is it macOS 11 we're now on as a minimum because Apple changed like the Xcode signing stuff, and we've had to move to like later Xcodes, which have dragged in later versions of macOS just to be able to do notarization and code signing. So again, I'm happy to leave it to people who are more active on Macs to decide what would be useful to support.
I was going to say a good starting point is whatever's in our inventory, like that's what we're using unless somebody says otherwise, right? So I don't know, like if there's anybody else who's like, I can see 10.15s are still in there.
Yeah, 10.15 is used only for testing. For releasing, we need at least 11.
Yeah, I thought we sort of removed most of the 10.15 stuff, so I think it's only like older versions of Node are tested on there, but we don't build on there anymore. Because one of the problems that Ulysses is aware of is we use Homebrew to install packages in Ansible, and Homebrew regularly drops support for older versions of macOS, and that's caused problems trying to rebuild the VMs because you end up having to build everything from source rather than get a pre-built package. So whatever you feel is sensible, I guess. It's kind of we'll have to deal with that accordingly. Obviously, every time we so what we do is we do compile Mac on Mac with there's a deployment target that you can when you compile your Mac OS application, you tell it I want to target Mac OS. And I think we bumped that to 11, or is that still to 10.15? But in theory, you should be able to build on newer Mac OS, but target the older one.
Right.
And that sort of has worked. But again, we do periodically bump that as well because, having having to maintain support for I mean, libuv dropped macOS 10.15 support and then sort of shoehorned it back in because it broke some of the Node stuff. So yeah, I think it's a discussion. You know, if there are good reasons to move and bump, we should sort of raise that in build or the Node core repo and have that discussion and just say, look, for these reasons, we want to move to these versions of macOS only.
But to start with, I think
Hmm.
just looking in the inventory file and saying we should preserve what we've got. Like, great, we should have discussion. Somebody says, hey, let's drop something good.
Yeah, but other than that, yeah, whatever we've got in the inventory.
Just saying, if we want like a concrete answer right now, you can get the list there, right? And
Right.
you know, unless somebody can, unless I don't know, Ulysses, the other Michael, like, we don't need 15 at all anymore. But I think in absence of that, it would be, we could just stick with that and then drop them when we don't need them, right?
I think we should remove 10.15 completely.
Yeah.
Apple stopped supporting it more than 1 year ago.
Yeah. If Michael is happy with this idea, I'm +1 also. So yeah,
and that
let's stick with
reduces
11.
That reduces the number of VMs and machines that we need to ask for from Max Stadium, because the ARM machines, you can only run 2 VMs on it in the cluster. So, you know, if we need extra machines, then that's, you know.
Okay, because I think then I see in there, is it just 11 and 12 that we have existing machines for?
Is it 11 and 13?
It's only 11, I think, that's working right now.
I see 112.
Right, but that's possibly someone was setting that up, but I don't think we're actually live running on that in terms of the CI. I think the issue that's actually on the agenda that was discussing the plan of like when to introduce newer versions of macOS, because I think, you know, we were discussing running on 12 and 13.
Yep. Yeah, ideally we skip 12, right? And we will jump directly to 13.
There was one other part of that proposal that I was curious if you had a chance to look at, Ulysses, that was a transitioning to using the ephemeral node strategy for Orca, so that, you know, we don't have these long running nodes that fill up with disk all the time, and, you know, we don't have to keep maintaining them, that they would just spin up and tear down. We could use Packer to, you know, use Ansible with Packer to continue to provision the nodes and you know, make the images and then have it spin up off the images. Did you have any thoughts or? I mean, it's ambitious, but I didn't know if that was a.
Yeah, I will say it's an ambitious plan. I think it's the way to go, honestly. But yeah, I didn't have the time in the past to check it out with the ephemerals. But yeah, I think it's a very good and safe way for us, because that way we can just discard and regenerate machines whatever we want. So that way it's going to be easier. Even when we have these typical problems with the storage and these kind of things, we can just remove and generate. So that will be much simple. So if we can explore that way, and we think that can be a good option, that can be, at least for me, the way to go. But yeah, maybe Michael has different ideas.
What?
Yeah, I think in principle, I think it's a good thing to try. But the main challenge here is to manage a cache for the compiler, the files that are created by the compiler. Because if we don't have a cache, it will take at least 1 or 2 hours to compile each job, which is difficult to work with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's the main difference between having the ephemeral node and not. Now, is there a way to pre-warm the cache as part of the image build process, or is it like every time it builds, it needs it needs to refresh that cache? And this is where my knowledge of like the build process is like
it's basically Ccache, right, Michael?
I don't know how it's set up on Macs, but probably it's Ccache like on Linux.
It is Ccache. Yeah,
it's Ccache.
So it might be something where, like, if you could mount a shared drive that the cache was written to. I think the thing is that because it does it incrementally, like every time there's a build, there's a smaller change than if you tried to rebuild the whole thing, right? And so after the first time, you're compiling.
It really depends what changes. You know, if we change V8, then typically you'll end up with a couple of hours anyway building. But if it's a smaller change, then mostly it's a very quick rebuild with Zcash. I think it might depend because I don't know. I think people have told me that like if you're on ARM, builds are quick anyway without Zcash. I mean, Zcash still speeds it up, but definitely
it's quite fast on an ARM machine. I had an M1 a couple years ago, and it took like 15 minutes to compile Node. And I don't understand why it's so slow, even on Orca with the ARM machines.
Yeah, I don't know.
The other question I had is, how would that work with Jenkins? Because currently all of our Jenkins is set up to like have the machines connected, right?
Right.
Yes.
There's a cloud plugin for Jenkins that basically Jenkins negotiates with the Orc API to spin up the new server every time it has a new job. So it's and that's maintained by that plugin is maintained by Mac Stadium. So
sounds good.
Yeah. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that it's worth pursuing, and that the main gotcha is whether or not builds are actually fast enough to follow the strategy. If there's and if there's a way to pre-warm the cache and make it so that it's not 2-hour builds, then that would be acceptable. But if they're really long builds with ephemeral nodes, then that would not work.
And I think you could look to see if there's some sort of shared storage or persistent storage even for the ephemeral ones, right? Because that way you get most of the benefits and maybe still be able to work around that issue.
Right.
I mean, I haven't looked at it. I know newer versions of Zcash can do tiered caching, where you have like a local cache and then some remote cache. It would still then presumably need to set up something to store the remote thing. But I mean, that's a possibility that there's like a remote cache that everything talks to, and then the ephemeral stuff has things just within it. But I haven't actually experimented with that. I just know that I've seen in like, I think it's Zcash 4 or something later, that there is this tiered caching that the older Zcaches, which we have been using, don't support.
So I think I'd have two questions. Ryan, you got all your questions answered. And then the other thing is, I think there's some sort of timeline, like potential timeline based on the certificate installation, that something needs to happen. So maybe you can raise that with him as well in terms of the plan.
Yeah. Could someone forward me those emails since I didn't get them originally? I need to see what the contents actually say, so to figure out how to pace this out. It might be something that like, well, we're not going to get that done in time before this needs to take place. So it might be a.
Harry, I'll forward to you right now.
Thanks.
Okay, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't say when, I don't think. It just says it's set to expire.
I don't know. There might be more stuff in the ticket, but I haven't actually looked through to.
Yeah, that's just the email. So maybe if you can log in and look at the ticket, right? So
yeah.
Yeah, you just should be able to see the ticket anyway, Ryan. I guess if you go to the support, you should have like this kind of tickets in the open tab kind of thing. So even if you don't get the emails, at least you can get the context, I guess. Yeah, worst case, we can just forward you the current emails. So just drop me a message later on, Ryan, if you have issues with that, and I can just send you the emails or some screenshot or whatever to see if there is something that we missed there.
Great. I will look there. Perfect.
That's good. More things that we want to discuss regarding the org infrastructure?
And just for the notes, I'm just gonna add in, it sounds like everybody's agreed with Ryan's proposal.
Yep. Good. Okay. Yeah, well, Michael is adding the notes. We can jump to the next topic in the agenda. So basically, next topic in the agenda, it's going to be issue 3597, which is related to the replacement for Equinix x64 servers.
I have a lot of status updates on this and some questions. I've started creating machines at MNX for this. I focused on the SmartOS machines first because I figured they were like low-hanging fruit that were not, essential, critical. Something went wrong with them. So I believe I've got the machines up and ready to go. The only issue is there's problems with V8s compiling on them, and it looks like they have patches for how to make that compile on a SmartOS. Now, I don't know how the build process works, like if there's how to add patches, where in the workflow a patch like this would go, where it's supposed to exist. So that's something that, yeah.
Yeah, usually we would apply the patches to the node code. I think they did say something about those patches wouldn't work on older SmartOS, which kind of leads me to believe that if we were to apply those patches, it would probably break the builds on the existing SmartOS
Yeah.
at Equinix. So I don't really know how to handle that.
Yeah, that was the thing I bumped into, is that the node patches, it's keying off of just, is it Solaris, not like which version of it, so
These must be for newer versions or something.
So we ran into something the last time we did a SmartOS migration where, due to the way the zones are created in SmartOS, it can pick stuff up from the host. So it's not like a wholly separated environment like a container environment is in Docker. And we did run into the exact same problem that we're seeing on the newer SmartOS when we did the last migration, which would have been on like the older versions of SmartOS. And something was changed on the machines, so to the way the zones were mounted, that meant they picked up the expected header files rather than the ones that they were getting, or whatever it is. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the exact technical details. It sounds like at one point there was a patch upstream to V8 which wasn't landed for whatever reason. So there was a patch that was sort of mooted to V8 and then it didn't land. And then so I'm just assuming that the MNX people have been carrying that patch in their own internal builds, applying that patch to Node and then building it themselves. And we've never had that in Node or V8. And then, we've done this migration and the exact same thing has happened. So
I'm trying to understand how we're building.
Because it's something to do with the way the headers are, and we did hit it before, but they did something to the way the zones were configured on the Equinix machines that meant that we didn't need a patch.
Yeah, so the current Equinix machines are running SmartOS as the hypervisor, and then the VMs that are on it are also SmartOS. And the way that we're building on that now is the hypervisor got upgraded, and then they made changes to the hypervisor to back those changes out so that we didn't get the new headers. So now the new machines are not on a SmartOS. Well, they're on a SmartOS hypervisor, but they're also SmartOS 21 and 23 as opposed to 18 and 20. And so there's been changes to those headers in that time, and that's what's breaking right now. And so there's no older version to back up to, and so it's just the newer version that is in conflict here, and it's awkward. I'm just not sure like how to make this build without I mean, maybe there's a way that we can patch Node as part of the actual Jenkins job and not actually patch Node upstream so that it's only these particular SmartOS builds to kind of isolate it to this. But I'm not sure if that's something you've ever done before or if this is,
Are you saying the hypervisors, like, so the hypervisor ones are new versions, but we're still testing with the existing versions that we did. Is that right? Or
no,
our
the existing hypervisors upgraded, which then got inherited by the VMs, and that broke things. And then that change was backed off on the existing hypervisors. So they put the old headers back in on the existing Equinix machines, on the the stuff we're running on now.
Right, but we're still, I guess what I'm trying to understand is like we're still going to be running SmartOS 20, SmartOS 18 testing.
No, we're going to move to the ones that MNX want.
Okay, so that's the problem, is that it's new version, like we're actually running and building in new versions.
We are currently running on end-of-life versions of SmartOS 18 and 20.
Okay. That's what I was trying to understand. It's that we're actually changing the versions. That's why it used to work and doesn't work now.
Right, and MNX, they don't have 18 and 20 to run off of. There's just no images, so the only choice is to move forward into supported versions. And the number is the year of when it's supported, so 2018, 2020.
How big are the patches?
Here, it's very last comment on this issue.
Maybe what I would suggest is we could put the patches onto a branch of Node and create a copy of the Jenkins job to run on the new machines, and then run the builds with the branch. And then when we're comfortable that that's building okay, we'd have to do a sort of somehow coordinated switch of the machines with the code landing to keep the builds clean. I suspect it'd be very difficult, unless we do what Ryan was suggesting of like somehow detecting the version and selectively applying the patch, which sounds a bit messy. To continually build on the existing machines and the new machines being set up without some additional complicated logic. From what I understand of what the person from NOx was saying about the patch, which was this patch will only work on the newer versions of SmartOS and it won't work on the older ones because of the change to the header.
But we don't have any stability guarantee or any official support for SmartOS, so we could remove. First, we remove the old versions, then we apply the patch, then we enable the new versions.
Yeah, either way, I think that would work. The only thing is, although we don't require those builds to pass, I think all the tooling will fall over if those builds fail. In fact, so yeah, I guess you're right. If we remove the build, put the patch, and then make sure the builds are working before re-enabling it in the workflow.
And we don't ship.
No, we don't ship binaries anymore on SmartOS.
And if especially if Brian is like, well, we don't care about those old versions which we are testing, then just removing them and putting the new ones in sounds like a reasonable plan.
Okay.
But applying the patch, that would be in the job for SmartOS, right? It would be like.
No, I would want to directly apply the patch onto the Node source code.
But the patch has to be done on the V8 source. Why don't they upstream something to V8?
We asked last time. I don't know the answer to that.
The patch that they submitted was one of those. They submitted it via GitHub, and they got one of those automated responses that says, "We don't do work here on GitHub. We do it over here." So that was,
that's correct. So the idea is they would hopefully follow the actual contribution guidelines for V8.
Right.
I mean, is Brian willing to submit the patch to V8 to Node and maintain it? Because I do worry a little bit that it'll break. If it's not upstreamed, it may break at some point, right? So there may be some ongoing work to keep it going.
But at the very least, we'd still need to float or backport to the earlier versions of Node, unless we stop testing those on SmartOS. because even if you upstreamed it to V8,
Sure, yeah,
that would only
yeah,
apply to newer versions of V8.
yeah.
I agree. The preference would be that if that's needed for V8 to build on SmartOS, then the right place for that would be to upstream that into V8. Yeah, I guess if we can reach out to them to see if they're willing to try that again. And I don't know if like either you, Michael, yeah, people that have submitted previously to V8 would be able to help MNX if they say that's it's different from what they're used to in terms of contributing. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, and the immediate concern is that I don't think there's a whole lot of goodwill left from Equinix as far as how long it's taken to get off of these machines, and so I think whatever we're able to do that doesn't rely on an upstream process, that if we're able to hold a patch for a while to be able to flip these on, or at least even say, well, tests won't run on these until we get that patch upstreamed, one way or the other, something, either half drop support for it, or temporarily drop, so that we can say, okay, we've got the machine set up, now it's just on the SmartOS community to get this upstreamed so that we can turn these back on.
Like and if the same patch applies to all versions, the least overhead is just the job to say like, okay, I'm going to clone Node, I'm going to apply this patch, and then I'm going to build and run, right? And that's probably the fastest. And I guess it comes to like, if our hope is eventually they'll get it upstream, then maybe that's a temporary gap, or if it's like, no, Node's going to float it for all this time, then we starting the process of getting it across the different versions. But I think, Richard, that would take a little time, right? Because got to land in core, and then or in like main, then it's got to be backported, and
yeah.
So I think I'd be okay to start with, as long as Brian's like, yeah, I'm going to keep an eye on it. If it starts failing, I'll fix it. Like having the job apply the patch as a short-term solution, right?
Okay, so are we in? Do we have any problems with like? So if we disconnect the SmartOS job, the existing SmartOS job from the current CI workflow, so that it's not automatically run on Node PRs until we've got we've got the patching in place and the builds passing on the new machines, then we can reattach it once we're convinced that the builds are working and passing, and then that will allow us to experiment on the build without interrupting the current PR workflows. Because otherwise the alternative is we make a copy of the job and do the experiments in the copy, which is another option, which is we do all the work in a copy of the job, and then once we're happy, we copy everything over to and change the actual job that's being used.
But I guess that means we have to be done, right?
Well, yes.
Right, I guess
my concern is
to Ryan's comment of how much time left there is.
Yeah.
If we're able to pause building SmartOS while we get this all worked out, then that allows that removes the pressure off of being able to shut off the Equinix machines.
I think we could just disable this current SmartOS jobs because they're, like you said, they're testing on end-of-life versions of SmartOS. So I think we could just make Node test pull request, not run test commit SmartOS until we're confident that that's been updated and passes on the new machines.
So putting on my SmartOS hat, that does mean that anything which would break it unrelated to the version would get through, right? Which is so there is some value to being testing like at least on one of the SmartOS versions, but
so again, this comes back to we could create a copy of the SmartOS job and do all the edits in the SmartOS job, and when we're happy with them, copy them across to the main one.
Yeah, I guess it comes down to how quickly it's like
Copying
how
a job
quickly we can do that, right? Like
copying a job in Jenkins is very simple. It's very easy.
yeah. No, yeah, like so maybe it makes sense as to copy, but maybe it does make sense. We copy the job, but then it's a matter of like what approach are we going to take that's going to be fast enough to then turn off the other ones quickly, right?
Well, I mean, we can in the copy of the job try things like you suggested, which is to apply the patch in the Jenkins job on top of the code base. I mean, we could do that without then messing up like the existing flow through the older. So the only thing that the copy of the job is, if you then had to copy it back into the current job, then you'd have to do those copies manually. But presumably we would know what those changes would be at that point in time. Or it might be possible to delete the existing job and rename the copy so that it's over. But
yeah, I think maybe like so we can easily make a copy, and then that's back to Ryan, how easy do you think it is to apply the patch in the job itself?
Well, this is where I don't, I'm not super familiar with building Node itself. So I mean, this appears to be just a patch to the dependencies. So
it would be if the patch is in a common format, which I think it looked like it was, a common diff format, then we have to get that onto the machine. If it's small enough, we could just echo it out in the job. If it's slightly bigger, we probably need to check it in somewhere. It could be the build repo or somewhere, and then check it out into the disk, and then use patch or whatever, assuming patch is actually installed on the SmartOS machine. But some sort of mechanism to apply the patch to the source code prior to us doing the configure and build.
The patch is relatively small. It's only like 39 lines.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't done it recently, but I know in the past we've done patches for. I think coverage we did patch something. So
I know. Yes,
we haven't not done this before, but we've tried to avoid it.
It's okay. It sounds like we should make a copy, and then it's basically like I would and we could like. I'm thinking like let's just check it in the build repo to start. Like I think that's where we've checked in past things like that.
Okay.
That's the SmartOS hosts. There are several other hosts to talk about in there. Okay, so the other one that I started looking at was backup.
Ryan, just before we
go ahead.
Before we move on, if you want to find like a time in our calendar, I'm happy to like spend a little bit of time and help you. I've done that patching in the job before, so I think I'm volunteering to spend a little bit of time with you to help you move that forward if you want.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah, because as far as like applying adding patches and into the build process, like the build starts and I don't know what's going on beyond that. So it's
we can get together, we can make the copy of the job, we can patch the actually like get it into the build repo and then have it pull and patch. Like that's something I definitely like. The one that Richard mentioned before, I'd done that one, so I we should be able to figure it out.
Okay, great. So the other server I started to look at was the backup server, because the way Equinix is set up, there's two very large servers that Equinix has in the MNX account, and one of them is the backup server, and the other one is everything else. And so I figured getting the backups off frees up that machine pretty quickly. And so from what I've been able to gather from looking at all the scripts and everything, there's nothing really fancy going. There's not a lot of like ZFS snapshots or anything like that. It's just rsync that's happening from all the hosts. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, my understanding is the backup machine is populated with rsyncs.
Okay, and so it doesn't need to be SmartOS or anything like that. It could be an Ubuntu machine. Like it's currently SmartOS 15. So,
as far as I know, I wasn't around when the whole thing was set up, and it may only be on SmartOS just because it was Joint that helped set up
right
all of that. I'm not aware that there's a particular reason that these machines have to be on SmartOS. But
yeah, I mean it's the only one of the infra ones that are, and so I figured that we could just transition that to Ubuntu, because
Yeah, I think the actual storage is the more interesting part rather than the mechanism.
Yeah. And Brianna has set us up with a 7 terabyte package, so that there's actually I have a host up that has 7 terabytes connected. It doesn't have the 55 terabytes that was incredibly connected to the existing backup machine, but I think it's enough because only about the existing backup machine has a massive RAID array connected to it, and there's nothing on it. I'm like, wow, this is huge. But yeah, those machines are about $5,000 a month worth of machine. They're huge.
Wow.
But they don't need to be, I don't think. So I think that's why Equinix is like, we want these back.
Right.
So that's the backup machine. The unencrypted machine, I had a question about that. I haven't detailed this in a issue yet, but what is that? Is that just releases but without HTTPS, or like what's the purpose of this?
It was, but we turned that off, so it's all going through HTTPS now. I suspect with the R2 stuff, and I think that's later on the agenda if we get to it, we may be able to at some point sunset the unencrypted machine. I'm a little bit hesitant to do it right now, but
yeah,
it's possible. So what we used to have is we used to have a DigitalOcean droplet, and we used to have an Equinix as a sort of fallback, and then Cloudflare would be configured with the DigitalOcean droplet as the primary server and the unencrypted server as the fallback. But unencrypted also served the download over HTTP without the S endpoint. But we turned that endpoint off recently, in the last year or two. So everything should be going through HTTPS now. So we don't need unencrypted for the unencrypted part. It still is a failover server in Cloudflare, as we've got a load balancer in Cloudflare, and that is the second server behind the DigitalOcean one.
Got it.
There is now an R2 thing in front of that, so it's like third thing down in the chain. And again, I suspect at some point we could possibly retire it. It's using rsync, I believe, from the DigitalOcean droplet. So the DigitalOcean, the stuff is being populated in the DigitalOcean droplet, and then that's being rsynced to unencrypted. So effectively, when we do releases with the node binaries that you download from the website, they go up onto the DigitalOcean droplet. There is something that copies them to R2 storage, and then there's an rsync process there's 2 rsync processes. One will take it to unencrypted so that it's the failover server, and another rsync will take it to backup. So backup will have everything. Unencrypted is a mirror, and so that's the current setup.
All right, so go ahead.
It's still, I do want to add though that it still regularly falls over to the other machine, right? Like I get emails.
Which is why I'm a little bit hesitant to remove it right now.
That's what I'm saying. Like I think for now we still need a machine because it's so. Well, I think we need to transition it based if we're doing it today, right? Which is what, from what Ryan's saying, it's not a wait and do it, turn it off later, right?
And again, I can't remember what it's running. Is it running some Ubuntu variant?
Ubuntu 16. It says.
Right. If you can maybe get that running on like something modern.
I just I'll build it on Ubuntu 22 or something like that. Yeah. But also just understanding the role of this machine and what it's doing now. Now I understand it's not an unencrypted machine anymore. It is a release backup basically.
Yeah. The names are just the aliases that we use to
and it's a live backup
in Cloudflare DNS entries for those. And again, someone's asked, do they need direct entries? But for the moment, let's keep those and discuss later on whether we can hide them so that people can't easily get to them, but have to go through Cloudflare. But for the moment,
and it's a live backup, right? Like it actually falls over every couple, once every couple days. So it is not just an offline backup. Is the
right.
Backup is offline in that no one can get to, well, in theory, no one can get to backup. Unencrypted has a web server that people might fall over onto.
As far as building unencrypted, is there I haven't fully dug into the Ansible. Is that fully Ansibled up, or is it relatively?
in theory, but I'm not aware that anyone's ever actually tried to run the playbook on a live system. So there may be bits missing. It's been more or less, this thing was set up and then someone tried to retroactively write playbooks to do what's on the live machine. And because it's a live machine, people have been very reluctant or avoided running the Ansible on the live machine just in case it screws everything up. Given that we haven't quite lost the old machine yet, it might be the opportunity to see if the Ansible playbooks can or cannot reconstruct those machines, because it would be good to know, and even better if it could. So as far as I know, the configuration in theory, the stuff should be in the Ansible scripts to recreate the machines, but we've never verified that that's the case.
And the rsyncs that are populating it now, what is that being rsynced from, and where's that script stored or running? I guess what I'm getting at is, would it be possible if I set up the second machine, set up rsync to sync to both, keep both of them in sync for a while, get the other one up and running?
Yeah. I can't remember which way around the rsyncs go, whether they're pushed or pulled. They are in Ansible. So in the Ansible directory, there are rsync scripts which are being used.
Okay.
And they should be a copy of what's on the machine. Again, it's like someone's edited the machine and then mirrored the scripts into the Ansible setup without then checking that if you reran the Ansible setup, you'd end up with the same thing back again. But in theory, they should be the same. So I think in Ansible, they're in a separate Ansible WW standalone directory, or maybe they're not. Maybe they're in the normal pool of stuff in where the playbooks are. But there's definitely a role, like a backup role somewhere in there. Because I remember at one point I went through and sort of had a look at how it was all working, because we had to rebuild the release CI server. So I had to work out how all that got backed up to the backup machine. So I did verify that there is stuff in Ansible that is a mirror of the stuff on the machines. I just can't remember which way around it goes, whether it was the machines pushing out the backup or backup reaching out to the machines to. It's all through rsync. I just can't remember which way around the rsync was.
I'm going to ask maybe a dumb question too. There's no we can take the image from where it's running now and move that image over.
Potentially. I talked to Brianna about that, and I don't think there was a real good way of doing that.
No, I just given time crunch, that's
if there was a way to just lift the VM and snapshot it.
Exactly. That's why I like VMs in the first place, is often you can just move them, but I know it's not always as easy as you'd hope.
There's going to have to be some rsyncing, isn't there, for the actual data on backup, for example. I mean, I guess it's possible unencrypted could be remirrored from the DigitalOcean droplet, but backup would require an actual
backup. I'm actually like that one. I think it's create a new one, let the rsync do its thing, right? The one which is like the machine.
We would have to actually manually rsync the existing backup so that the new stuff gets incrementally backed up on top of it. Because not everything in backup is on the current live servers.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
So there's some stuff on backup that's not anywhere else. That needs to be backed up. Sorry, that needs to be migrated, and then the actual backup process, once we get that working again, should then mirror all the new stuff. But all the old historic stuff we need to copy over, because they might not be on the.
What kind of old stuff is there?
Do you remember we culled like builds on the download server? We were running out of space. They're still in backup. Now, okay, you might make the argument that we don't care about them because we culled them. But at the moment, they are on the backup server if we ever needed to pull them out again.
Sure. I'm just wondering if at this point, those could be just, it's like, yep, they just don't come along.
Yeah,
anyway, that's a separate, makes it more complicated.
And I can't remember. I think like all the old IOJS stuff is on backup. And again, I can't even remember if you can get to the IOJS builds. Probably you can through the website. I can't remember. But there's a lot of old stuff there. And the question is, do we preserve that? It's a one-way thing. Yeah, if we decide not to do it, then it'll all be gone once the old servers are disappear.
Yeah, one thing that's definitely not within my wheelhouse is the capacity to decide on any of what should be kept or what should be removed. So
yeah, just mirroring it probably makes the most sense unless there's a problem with that, right? Because then we don't have to figure it out.
Yeah, I think at least for backup, for unencrypted, I think we could try. Let's see what happens when we just try and mirror the current stuff as live as is. But yeah, backup. I think the way the backups are done, I'd be more comfortable if the actual data was mirrored. Yeah, updating it to a different OS or a newer OS, whatever. That's probably fine. But the actual data itself, I think, needs to be arsynced across from the existing server, and then we make sure that the live stuff can continue to talk to the replacement. Yeah, I would need to refresh my memory. I can't even remember. So for example, if it was a push rsync, it may be going to like either an IP address or a DNS entry. I'd have to refresh my memory or look in the Ansible to see which way around things are set up.
We have to figure for sure, but I kind of have a feeling it's a Paul.
It could be, yeah. So that might be different.
When we migrated it in the past, we didn't actually have to change anything. But
yeah, I think on that note, I think Ryan, you were asking for more access to some of the secret stuff. So I think
I don't have infra access, so I can't actually provision any of these machines. And I know that's one more like layer of onboarding that is required. And
I think we proposed that, and I don't think anyone objected. So I think after it's been at least 2 weeks now, I think, since we opened that. I think we just give you that access. So that will allow you to SSH onto those machines and actually poke around and have a look and see how it done. I think you were given the Jenkins access.
Yes, I was.
Both CIs. So yeah, I think it's just the secrets access, and then I know you asked for some further access to some of the cloud providers. We'd probably have to work through those individually, because I think some of them, like IBM Cloud, I think Michael, I probably need to ask you to remind me how that worked in terms of granting access to people. I know we had trouble with Michael Zasso adding him to the IBM Cloud account, so hopefully
that would be an invite, but
but yeah. We'd have to work through that list and individually say, right, for this account. So once we give you access to secrets, there is an admin login, an encrypted admin logins file, which sort of does mention the other cloud providers. But some of them are kind of, I think some of us might need to contact other people to get you added to accounts.
And I think I've seen talk of a 1Password. Is that?
I don't know much about that. Michael does.
Okay.
Yeah, I can invite you to that. I think basically at this point, like I see discussion of Jenkins access was provided. We probably should get Ryan into the lists on the README that are like, he's one of the people.
Yeah, I'll take that action. I'll add him to the secrets repo and then add him to the GitHub teams and then resync the README so that it's all up to date. And then
I can't remember the specific wording of the proposal, but I think it's just like, hey, yeah, we've promoted Ryan to an infra level build member, right?
Yeah, I think it was worded. It was worded in such a way that I think we said I'm comfortable giving him like access to everything. Right, we can increase it incrementally again and then again.
No, I'm just saying. Yeah. We should treat it just like that. Like basically, his name should show up in the infra min. Jenkins list. All he's just like one of us.
Yeah, I'll go through the remaining things to at least get the access, and then right, once I'll tell you when that's happened, and if you then look and you have further questions, let us know, and we'll figure something out. And then the only thing then remaining would be the actual individual adding to the other cloud accounts.
And then associated with that, I need to dole back access to you all for things like mnx.io and some of these other accounts that, like, right now I'm the only one with access, or the LF is the only one with access. So need to make sure that we've got ability for other people to get in there.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
Ryan,
that'll give you the access to add those things. I have to drop off, talk to everybody later.
All right, see you, Michael. I guess, Ryan, that's a discussion as to how we think, maybe, you know, I don't mind in the short term, but sort of long term, how we envisage, you know, the relationship with the LFIT working, whether LFIT would be the sole, what's the word, steward of like being able to
Yeah.
do things there, in which case maybe then Build doesn't need to know that. But
right. I think we need to figure out how this relationship is actually going to work going forward, because you know there's the way the STF was envisioned, and then the reality of getting in and seeing how all your infra actually works and how everything works together. It's like, okay, these are misaligned. We can still be of value and help, but you know there are some things where it's like, I think we're going to have shared accountability and shared responsibility on some of these things, because you know I think one of the main issues is we don't really have a way of letting LFIT have access to stuff. We've given me trust and access to stuff, and which is fine. I can help, but it removes that like LFIT's on call 24/7, because I can't be for you know. So yeah, but we're still kind of like figuring out exactly what our process is going to be going forward with that, and you know, kind of ironing it out. But you know, in the meantime, yeah,
sounds good.
I did have one more question, hopefully short, on the Equinix servers. The Jenkins workspace machines, they seem to be doing mostly Git cloning.
Yes.
Except there is a coverity. Sorry.
Yeah, coverity. It's a code.
Coverity. That's the sorry. That's what I was trying to. So there's also coverity jobs that are running on there that isn't part of it. That's like it's part of the Git cloning process that runs there first. Is that what I'm understanding?
No, there's a separate Jenkins job that runs coverity.
Okay, so when I build these new ones, do they need to have like? There's a lot of CPU and a lot of memory on the two existing Equinix ones, but the IBM one doesn't necessarily have that level of horsepower.
Right.
Like
we have talked recently about maybe moving coverity to the Hetzner machines that we recently replaced. Those benchmark machines, which are much larger.
Yeah.
Because we did run into an issue running the scan and building Node with the coverity. Coverity basically have like a front end that sits in front of the compiler so it can do the static analysis, and that was running out of memory. So we had a temporary band-aid in place to reduce the number of threads it was running on. So that's a possible option, that one of us could try and move the coverity to the Hetzner machines, which would mean the Jenkins workspace machines wouldn't need the coverity install. And then, I guess the question is how much memory and CPU is actually needed to do the Git cloning. There is a Git repository on one of the workspace machines. And again, I don't know how much resources the Git server. I mean, I guess you're going through SSH anyway to clone that. But we've got some jobs in Jenkins called like fand, like ARM fand and Windows fand. And what they do is they build Node, then they push the compiled artifacts to the Git repository that's sitting on one of these Jenkins workspace machines. I think it's 7. I can't. It's either 6, 7, or 8 because we only have 3 of them. But one of them has been sort of designated as this is the temporary binary Git repository. So the fan jobs, they compile, push there, and then the test jobs pull the binaries down again from there and run tests. So in a separate place from where they're built. Again, someone's asked, does it have to be in the temporary Git repository? Could we use Jenkins? You can push artifacts to Jenkins and pull them out from Jenkins. Again, that would possibly require someone to spend the time to work out how, whether that's feasible and what that means then for storage. So obviously at the moment, the storage is going to the temporary Git repository. If we then pushed it to Jenkins, does that mean the Jenkins servers need to have bigger disk to store those binaries? At the moment, I think the way that the Ansible scripts work, each Jenkins workspace has the Git thing set up, but only one of them is actually being pushed to. So one of those machines will have more used disk than the others. But the Equinix machines are the same spec, I think, so they've got the same amount of space.
Right, and the Equinix machines have a lot of disk spec, and that's where I was. That's where I opened that one issue, like, hey, can we do shallow clones? And it looks like that's probably not an option. It was just maybe we could save a lot of space here if we didn't have full repos. But
it's not impossible, but the problem is it's difficult to know how far back. It couldn't be like a shallow clone of one. And the question is that how far back does it need to go? Because essentially it's the Jenkins job just tried to rebase the change onto the parent branch, and then the question is
it was just a question of like, hey, maybe we could save space this way, but it looks like let's just not touch that for now. So I think my main the disk space is relatively simple, but like would 2 vCPUs be enough to run on those? Is that like, what are we doing on IBM or?
So I mean, the IBM machine does have all the same stuff that's on the Equinix machines. I just don't think it's running the coverity scans, not because we've told it not to, but because Jenkins just has tended to prefer one of the Equinix machines to run the job on. So that's just by chance, I guess. And again, like, although the setup's there for the Git temporary repository, that's not the designated IP address, so things aren't being pushed there. So it is doing almost all the Jenkins jobs. They do check out to Jenkins workspace before they then go onto the machines to do the jobs themselves. I can't remember the exact reason that it's done that way, but it does mean that almost every build has a Jenkins workspace on a Jenkins workspace machine. It might be partly with something to do with the rebasing, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to go dig through the Git history, the GitHub history.
Okay, and then I guess the reason I was trying to poke into Grafana in the first place was to see if there was historical CPU, historical stuff like that for these servers in there. I wasn't sure if that was something you guys were tracking or not, so I was just gonna.
Not on an active basis. I mean, I'm hoping it's still there in terms of the data is still being pushed there and live. But I know, was it Brian said that we ran out of space on the Grafana server? So I don't know if that just stopped being pushed or, I don't know. I mean, we do have alerts set up on Grafana for disk space for some of the servers, and that is getting mirrored into. There's an alerts channel on Slack. So we are using Grafana for those alerts. I don't think I've seen one in a while, but well, maybe that's not true. I can't remember. But yeah, the Grafana thing was like an experiment that people set up, and if we can make more use of that, then great. Otherwise, it's there, and you can actually gain anything useful out of the nice graphs and stuff.
Yeah, no, really, my main question with that was, could it inform me on how much CPU was actually being used by these workspace machines? Like, is having the Git fan out job, does it even use that much CPU, or is it all just disk and network?
I can't remember if the individual Jenkins machines the individual workspace machines are in Grafana. So I know that the 2 Jenkins servers are there, as is unencrypted, possibly backup. No, maybe not backup, but direct and unencrypted are, and the 2 Jenkins servers are definitely in Grafana. And we're monitoring disk space on those machines. I guess in theory, there's no reason that other machines couldn't be added.
Well, and I'm just looking for the historical data so I can see, like, if it hasn't been added, then it's not there. Then that won't help, and it's just sort of do your instincts tell me we need more than 2 CPUs, or?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I think probably for Coverity, otherwise the Coverity build would take a very long time. But I think given the issues we have with building, there is an issue open that I can possibly find later on. We said, for temporary, we'll reduce the number of threads that's running on, but maybe long term, we should just move this to the Hetzner machine, because we know the Hetzner machines have much more CPU, much more RAM. And if we've got those anyway for running the benchmarks and stuff, then the Coverity is a once a day job, because we we can only push to you run the scan and then you push the scan artifacts to Synopsys, and they actually do a scan on the stuff you push up, and you can only do that once a day for open source stuff. So the Jenkins thing we have is only a once a day job that runs. So again, those Hetzner machines, yeah, we can tolerate a once a day job to do that. Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'll probably just try and proceed with something of a stab in the dark size. Probably the 4v CPU, 1 terabyte disks options to create 2 of those, and then you were working on the Ansible for the Coverity on those workspace machines, right?
I wasn't, but I could possibly take a look at that. So it was muted as a.
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think we need to drop here because we are blocking the web server framework meeting. Actually.
Yep.